I think ultimately we manifest who we are. And we have this compass and we have this guide within us that takes us to places. I think visualization is very important. It's very important to ask ourselves that, what is it that I want? The concept of rizq in Islam, we generally translate it as sustenance.
What do you think is the most common problem we have as a society?
The only people which grow in life are people with growth mindset.
How often do you familiarize people with the idea of being comfortable with a little bit of discomfort?
Studies have consistently shown that people who invest in experiences rather than material things tend to be happier and more fulfilled about their life. एक तेरी चाहत है और एक मेरी चाहत है और होगा वही जो मेरी चाहत है और अगर तूने सुपुर्द किया अपनी चाहत को उसकी जो मेरी चाहत है तो तुझे दूंगा वो जो तेरी चाहत है।
वेलकम टू द वैली ऑफ विजडम पॉडकास्ट। मैं हूं आपका होस्ट फरहत उमर और हम आज हैं इन द मिडल ऑफ अ फॉरेस्ट। व्हाट आर वी डूइंग हियर? पता करेंगे। मेरे साथ जुड़े हुए हैं आज एक ऐसे इंसान जिनको मैं काफी अरसे से इस पॉडकास्ट पे देखना चाह रहा था और बहुत सारे और इंसान जो मेरे सामने अभी हैं और इस पॉडकास्ट का एक अहम हिस्सा हैं। हो क्या रहा है आज इस जंगल में और हम किस चीजों के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, इस सब को आज जानेंगे इस पॉडकास्ट में। विद मी इज यकीन सिकंदर. He is a psychotherapist, a traveler, a mentor who has had a remarkable impact on my life and the lives of countless people. It is so good to have him on Valley of Wisdom. Welcome, Yaqeen.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I have watched some of the episodes of Valley of Wisdom. And this is a wonderful podcast. And this is something local. And I'm a Kashmiri. And it's really wonderful to be here with you and with all the other participants that we have today in this special episode.
So, Yaqeen, हम क्या कर रहे हैं in the middle of forest? What's happening?
What's actually happening is हम एक retreat कर रहे हैं. It's one of a kind, and this is the first time something like this is happening in Kashmir. A 2-day retreat by the name of Compass, which you have rightfully founded. And on the second day, we are exploring the outdoors. We're exploring the nature and our relationship with that nature. And when people come together, that's where the magic happens. I think that's why we're all gathered here.
Amazing, amazing. And thank you so much, Yaqeen, for doing it. I really wait for this time because you are here in this part of the year, and I really look forward to it. And we have this remarkable community that we are growing together.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. So, you talk about magic. Do you believe in magic?
Yes, I do. Because when human beings put their efforts and energies together, it does create magic. And when we say magic, it means something extraordinary happening. And sometimes we feel like we are very ordinary. But the whole idea of magic is that even people who are ordinary can create something extraordinary, right? I mean, look at the universe, how vast it is, right? I mean, it's endless. Billions and billions of galaxies and the stars and the planets. If we gather all the sand in the world, it is, I mean, if we know the number of planets and the stars and the celestial bodies we have, and then we compare it to the grains of the sand that we have in the world, I mean, the grains of sand wouldn't be enough. So imagine the scale of the vastness of the universe, and imagine the whole of the earth is like a grain of sand.
Right, right.
I mean, yet Allah cares about us
Right.
being so minute, and yet we have a presence, and yet we can create impact. And that's something remarkable for me if you see it from that picture.
It genuinely is magical. I mean, our existence and then how we are positioned in the universe,
Right.
and then the fact that we are alive and there are these trillions of cells in our body,
Absolutely.
and they are making our each second possible, each cell having millions of processes going on. My God, it's remarkable.
And it's no less than magic.
Yeah, it is. It is. I've had a background in genetics, and when we work on cells and DNA and RNA and all these different things, we realize, oh my God, it's so vast,
Right.
and even handling small aspects of these can be jarring. It will take a whole laboratory to take care of small amount of DNA to put it in the right environment, in the right conditions, in the right temperatures,
Absolutely.
in the right solutions. But here we are, and there is so much happening in our bodies right now. And I keep telling people, Don't let anybody tell you you're not special. You have
Right.
37 trillion cells working tirelessly to make your one moment possible.
Correct. And this is no less than magic.
It is. It is. And you know, when you talk about magic, what are your thoughts on this weird thing they call the law of attraction, the law of manifestation?
I think ultimately we manifest who we are. And we have this compass and we have this guide within us that takes us to places. Now, the idea of life itself is that life always follows a path. It is the nature of life. Now, the question is who has set that path for you? It's either you or it's someone else, but it has to follow its own course.
Right.
So, I think the idea of manifestation for me is if you really want something and you make it a part of yourself that how bad you truly want it, your steps will be guided. But the most important part is taking the initiative. If you take the first step, the way keeps on appearing.
Beautiful.
And I think I believe in it because this is how, in the right times, I met the right people. One thing led to another, and that's how I am where I am.
Beautiful. So there are two aspects of it. The first is thinking about something. The first is imagining something. Imagine a life for yourself. And the second is taking the steps. So these are both essential components of manifesting, right?
Right, because a huge part of it is actually action. I remember this story that I was reading about Sir C.V. Raman, who got a Nobel Prize. And somebody asked him, he came to him and said, you know what, you got the Nobel Prize because you just got lucky. And he thought for a while and he said, yes, I just got lucky. But luck favors a prepared mind.
So true.
So we have to prepare our minds towards what we want. And once we put ourselves in that direction, I believe the way keeps appearing and then there's no looking back.
So there is this idea of directed awareness. So when you think about something and you imagine it and you keep thinking about it, you
Right.
start seeing more of things that are relevant to that thing appearing in front of you.
Correct.
So, in fact, I read somewhere that there is this reticular activating system that actually helps us fixate on what we really
Yeah.
believe in, right?
Right.
What we think about. So,
Right.
in a way, we have this remarkable capability of shaping our own reality,
Yes.
right? And then imagination becomes a powerful tool.
Absolutely. I think visualization is very important. It's very important to ask ourselves that what is it that I want? And how bad do I really want it? Because if you just have this focus on that one thing that you really want in your life, you will find a way to have it. When I was growing up, I was a young kid, right? 6, 7, 8 years old. And I would look at these planes because I live close to the Srinagar airport. And I would see these planes really close. And I was like, one day I'll travel. One day I'll be on that plane. I just had no idea how I'm going to do that. And I mean, I always say this. I fly so often and I change countries more than people change their shoes, right? So how did that become a reality? You know, because when you start looking at problems, they start getting bigger. How am I going to travel? Where am I going to find the money? Where am I going to go? How do I find visas to these countries? Where am I going to stay? What about the food? And so many questions because you are looking at the problem.
Right.
But when you look at the solution that I want to do this, I did find a way to do it and everything started falling in place.
yeah, right.
But the first question is that are you ready to put in the effort?
Right.
Take that initiative.
Right.
Tell yourself what is it that you want and keep visualizing it and taking the relevant actions with it is also very important. What you want and ultimately how much do you want it?
Right.
And then one step in the right direction and then the way keeps appearing. Even if you don't have all the answers, it's absolutely okay. If you don't know what you don't, I mean, if you don't know what you want, at least be certain about what you don't want.
Wow. Beautiful. That's an important realization. And can we manifest people?
Absolutely. I would say that about my wife who's here. Um, it's a journey that you are walking the path of your life and you attract certain kind of people, right? I mean, you attract all kinds of people, but people who are closer to what you believe in,
Right.
right? They just stay.
Uh-huh.
And that's how you know,
Right.
right?
Right.
Somebody being patient with you, being a part of that journey and growing together. I think that's a very important aspect of manifesting people. How we met, how
Right.
far we go back,
Right.
more than a
Exactly.
decade.
Exactly.
And I think the idea of investment, I mean, if we diversify that portfolio, it also, that's why the concept of risk in Islam, we generally translate it as sustenance.
True.
It's incorrect. Risk is also the good people you meet. Your risk is also the knowledge that you have.
Right.
It's also the sum total of the resources that
Right,
you have,
right.
which you can use as a toolkit to advance in your mission.
Uh-huh.
So then the concept of Baraka, which is there, is not actually the idea that you put some amount of money somewhere and it becomes double,
Right,
or it multiplies,
right.
right? Or it compounds. But the idea is that the efforts that you put, because you put them with sincerity, the effect and the impact of that is grand. It's
Right,
huge.
right. Amazing. You know, you talk about risk, and I'm reminded of this CFO I recently met of a nice company doing exceptionally well.
Right.
Their company is doing great, and they're getting a lot of attention nationwide. And I had this interaction with him where we talked about, okay, your his wheel of life. So wheel of life is this idea where we see where our life is in different domains. So where you are health wise, relationship wise, and all these different aspects of life. And for the audience, if they want to check, they can go to they can just search Wheel of Life on Google, and they'll go
Right.
to there's an online test. It hardly takes a few minutes. So I made him go through this test, and when I
Right.
saw the Wheel of Life, it was so skewed,
Right.
and there were so many different aspects of his life which were not even partly filled. So I asked him what's wrong, and when he opened up, he started talking about his problems, and he was like, "There are so many other aspects of my life which are not well. You know, there is this flashy world out there that may attract a lot of youth, and that may make them feel, hey, this is the only way life can be, and they are the only ones who are living life.
Right.
But when you see life as a whole, and when you go a little deeper, or when you go closer, you realize, no, that's not it. And then risk, when you talk about risk, I'm so thankful for you to bring it up. It's not just about how much you have in terms of money or material aspirations. It's a very holistic of an idea.
No, absolutely. I think in the popular culture, when we look at where do we take our sources from, I think that's very important. The content that we consume.
Right.
So ultimately, social media, it just paints this picture where we are like, oh, these people are having such a great life, these influencers, and they get to travel and they get to do all these things and be in the best places. And then you compare it with your life and you're like, you know what? My life is just miserable. You see, when we are comparing our lives with the best of what they are trying to show us with the worst of our life, it's a very unfair comparison.
True.
That happens. So, what ends up happening then is we don't know the reality of people. I mean, the reality is we don't even know ourselves properly.
Right.
So, it's very hard even to judge other people. So, I think the standard that we have of this influencer culture is destroying our young people and our societies. Because if we look at the life of our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his methodology, it was to inspire people, not influence them. He was very humble in his stature, right? And he would inspire people and he would tell them that don't do this, and they will just not do it. And
Right.
this has been one of the dilemmas of the scholars, that if we have a government which is ruled according to Islamic laws, which of the laws are you actually going to impose? Because
Okay.
our Prophet didn't have to impose anything. He just
Right.
said, leave alcohol, and people just left it.
Right.
So the idea is the society or the people, they just evolve. Things are not imposed or they are not influenced as such, but it's an inspiration that draws you
Right.
and puts you closer to your mission as well as your Lord.
That's beautiful. And as a therapist, what do you think is the most common problem we have as a society? Because I'm sure you have access to the worst demons our society has.
Right. I think one of the most important things that I have learned from being a therapist is words are powerful, right?
Wow.
It's the words that we fall for.
Uh-huh.
It's the words that break our hearts.
Uh-huh.
And ultimately, it's also the words that heal. So, listening to other people without judging them. And that's one of the reasons why therapy works, because when stories are told in safe spaces where people don't feel judged, the shame and the guilt, it starts going away. So, one of the ideas that therapy has actually taught me, the problems that people have, modern people, I mean, today's generation or the younger people that I have, is the problem of connection. I mean, children, when we grow up, we need to have good role models and we need to be connected to ourselves, to the society, and to the world at large. But what the modern world and the society systematically does is it disconnects us from our own heart, because the secret of emotions, the secret of love, and the secret of all the goodness lies within the heart. And the modern world is hell bent upon disconnecting you from your heart. That's why you have all the distractions. I mean, be it Netflix or all those series. It's just unlimited doom scrolling. So, what's the idea? It slowly starts disconnecting you from yourself. So, that disconnection, it really needs to be addressed. And that is a huge problem. And I think another major problem that I have actually identified from the small number of sample or the population that I see in my clinical practice is also resistance, what we call as in therapy, right? There are certain things where you might feel that you have to resist. Why this happened to me? Why just me? Why not someone else? But ultimately, we also have to believe that there is a grand system and everything happens for a reason. And when I was growing up, I think I was 14 or 15, I came across this beautiful saying, which people say that it's a hadith, which it's not, but it's a very wise saying. And I'll say it in Urdu because in English it wouldn't make the impact it has in Urdu. It's like Allah is talking to the believers, to us, to the creation, and He is addressing the people in first person. And it goes like this: एक तेरी चाहत है और एक मेरी चाहत है, और होगा वही जो मेरी चाहत है। और अगर तूने सुपुर्द किया अपनी चाहत को उसकी जो मेरी चाहत है, तो तुझे दूंगा वो जो तेरी चाहत है। और अगर तूने मुखालफत की उसकी जो मेरी चाहत है, फिर तुझे थका दूंगा उसमें जो तेरी चाहत है, और फिर भी होगा वही जो मेरी चाहत है। क्या बात है, क्या बात है। So the idea of acceptance, right? You know, the idea that there are things that we have to accept, then we have to realize what we do about it. But what ends up happening is, rather accepting, we get into this reactionary mode. You know, this primal instinct that
a defensive mode.
Oh yeah, a defensive mode.
I'm not responsible.
Right?
It's not because of me.
It's not because of me. It's always somebody else's fault. Right? It's always someone else. So this is one of the things that therapy does, is it makes people responsible. Because the world out there, it will be unfair. You will have problems. There will be a lot of different things that will happen, and you will have to stand up on your feet, and you will have to have that courage. But the idea is, rather than being revengeful, why not assess the situation, see what's exactly happening, and what you can do about it? Because what ends up happening in the mode of reaction is we start judging the world. We start judging people, and we start being bitter and cynical about every single thing. But the reality or the fact of the matter is, we haven't even looked deeper into ourselves. We don't know even who we are. So it's
What
very
we want,
difficult.
yeah.
Exactly. So it's very difficult to know who the other person is. So I think it's really important that we take out time, rather than, you know, cursing the darkness, light a candle. Why don't we look deeper into ourselves? Because Carl Jung said this: whoever looks inside awakens. He said, whoever looks outside dreams, whoever looks inside awakens.
Amazing, amazing. So मेरी मानो अपने अंदर खो जाओ, सबकी छोड़ो पहले अपने हो जाओ.
Right.
So मुझे एक बात बोलें आप, जब आप थेरेपी में आप देखते होंगे, you have a lot of different clients and they have different issues, they have different blocks. How often does it happen that they really understand that they have the agency, or do
Right.
we in any way have the agency to change our lives in any way?
Oh, we absolutely have that. And as a therapist, one of the things we do in therapy is making people accountable for their actions. You know, so because you're responsible, and the resistance here is that people are like, no, it was never my fault. But when you start accepting that it has something to do with you, that acknowledgement comes in first, and then the sense of agency which people have to solve our problems, to have our autonomy. It's really important, because initially it might look to the person that I would have to blame myself. Oh, I've been doing this for 30 years. So was I an idiot for the 30 years? How do I change myself? So that's the resistance there. But once you address that, it's actually very empowering, because it frees the person from the expectations of others, from the expectations of society. Because ultimately, freedom is also a mental state.
Right, exactly. And I remember, the story of Viktor Frankl and how he was in this Nazi camp,
Right.
and he had a terrible time because what used to happen in Nazi camps was उनके रिश्तेदारों को मार दिया गया, and it was a terrible state to be in. But that was the time he had this realization that he could actually retire
Right.
to some place and imagine himself teaching his students. And he realized that between my response to the external stimulus, there is a space where I can decide how I respond to the situation.
Right.
And it started having a lot of impact on his life and his attitude. And thankfully, he came out and he wrote Man's Search for Meaning, which is like this remarkable book and has
Right.
transformed so many lives. I really believe it. I mean, we have this personal agency, and howsoever limited it is, people talk about happiness, and then
Right.
there is this happiness literature saying most of the happiness is, half of it is in your genes, a part of it is fixed because of the society and everything else. You have a limited part, and I say, rather than fixing your focus on your genes that you cannot change or the external circumstances that you cannot change, why don't we focus on that small part and see what can we do there?
Absolutely. And I think focusing on what we have rather than what we are missing
Right.
is the key part.
Uh-huh.
But look at the idea that how we were born free, but we always feel that we are in shackles.
Right.
Sometimes those problems are real, but more often than not, they are mostly imagined.
Uh-huh.
Because look at the ideas. For example, we're just talking about freedom, right?
Right.
I certainly believe that freedom is not a physical space,
Uh-huh.
it's a state of mind.
Right.
It's a state of mind. You are free when you believe you're free. Ibn Taymiyyah said this. He said something beautiful. He said, what can my enemies do to me? My paradise lies in my heart. If they kill me, I'm a shaheed, I'm a martyr. If they throw me out of the country, right? So that's like hijrah. And if they put me in the jail, that's khalwa, like a state of being alone with yourself and your Lord. It's solitude. So that is freedom. But why do we feel that we are shackled? We don't have freedom. Because this is where the dilemma lies. If you tell yourself today, I am free, it also means whatever you do next is your responsibility. And we always resist responsibility. So we always find someone to blame. We, countries as nations and people as individuals, we always want someone to blame, because so far as somebody is there to blame, the responsibility is off you, which is why it's always somebody else's fault. But the day you tell yourself, you know what, I'm actually free to choose. I have the sense of agency. And this is where people lack the sense of agency, because that sense of agency comes with responsibility. And in our Islamic tradition, human beings, we are mukallaf, and it comes from the word taklif. And the idea is we have responsibility, right? You know, the existential burden.
Exactly, and we have to, and stressors, in whatever ways they come, they do not always kill us. They do not always destroy us. And stressors are actually very, very important. And they help us navigate our lives in a better way.
Right.
They help us move. They help us get stronger. And
Absolutely.
we can only connect the dots backwards. All the struggles that we are currently facing, maybe they are God's way of telling you, you need to get stronger for a bigger responsibility that I have, that I will entrust you somewhere later.
Right.
So it's a realization that we all should have. In fact, there was this concept, and it's kind of very simple, but also very profound. The concept of this, the idea called circle of influence and circle of concern.
Right.
So It was mentioned in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about this idea that, okay, we have a lot of concerns and we want, a war to end in some place, and we want the inflation to go down, and we want a certain political party to be in power, and all these different issues. But can you really do something about it? If you cannot,
Right.
then why don't you focus on your circle of influence? What can
Absolutely.
you really do
Right.
today? And if it is making your bed, why don't you start with that?
Right.
And our kids and our young generation need to be taught personal responsibility.
Yeah.
They need to be taught that you need to be responsible for yourselves early on, and then work on these smaller aspects, and then your circle of influence starts getting bigger.
And I think an important aspect of therapy is as well, one of the activities that we do in therapy is we tell our clients to make like a couple of circles, concentric circles,
Okay.
right? In the inner circle, you write about things that are within your control.
Okay.
And in the external circle, you write things which are not in your control. And you start
Right.
with something basic, right? In the inner circle, what is in your control? The dress that you're wearing.
Right.
Both of us are
Right.
wearing black. We chose to wear it, right?
Right.
What is in the external circle, something that you cannot control, weather, right? And then when people start filling this up, and then I ask them this question that how many of the things are there in the external circle which you are actually trying to control? And we often find that we are trying to control things which are beyond our control.
So true.
So it's very important to identify that. It's very important to identify what is within my control and why don't I do that more often? And that will increase my sense of agency and autonomy and confidence.
So true. And while we were talking about having this conversation, I remember we talked about getting these carpets here and everything in the
Yeah.
middle of the forest would have been
Correct.
such a big deal, and we talked about, oh, how would it rain that day, how would the weather be, and everything else.
Right.
How would we arrange the logistics? But then we took the call,
Right.
and that call ultimately resulted us in being here. And see, the weather favored us.
I think human beings have this tendency that we want to be certain about everything. Reality is we cannot be.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I mean, I tend to fly often. I don't remember when was the last time I went to the pilot in the cockpit and said, how many hours of flying experience do you
Right.
actually have?
Right.
So 300 people at least in the plane, you do put your lives in the hands of that pilot.
Right.
Right? Similarly, when you're doing other journeys. So we cannot be certain about everything in life, but let's make sure what is in our sphere of control. Let's try to do that. Rest, let the process unravel itself.
Right.
Otherwise, that would be a lot for us to bear.
So the bottom line is, take the first step.
Absolutely. It's very important to do that. And it's also very important to, I think one of the things that I have actually realized, we have this beautiful concept in our religion, right? When it comes to other people. And I'm mentioning people here because ultimately human beings were interdependent on one another. And there is this disconnect between people, right? We often meet people online nowadays.
Right.
Yeah. So that human connection and that patience that is needed to sustain a relationship, that is somewhere fading away.
True.
And we have this beautiful concept which is called husna zan, right? Which is actually something which is essential to be embedded in our mind. But if I'm thinking, Dr. Farhat is a great person, it's not husna zan. I know you from last 20 years and I know that's how it is. The idea of husna zan is you have to have it with people about which you think negative.
Right.
People who have harmed you, people who have hurt you, right? But you are still able to forgive that and take the higher road. It's really important because one of the things, and magic we were talking about, it happens when people come together,
Right.
when people collaborate together. And I think we are losing that skill somehow. Yes, people do a lot of collaborations when it comes to capitalistic interest or when it comes to money. But I am talking about having a community of people with different talents. I mean, look at it in this manner. If we look at Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they had different talents,
Right.
You have a person like Khalid bin Walid, who is an excellent general, knows how to, knows the art of war, right? Knows it so well that there is this confidence that if Khalid is leading a war, we are going to win, right? Because he knows
So true.
the art of the war. And there is our other Sahaba, right? Who are good in poetry, who are good in something else, right? And just like you have a necklace made of pearls, and our prophet took all of them and put them like together, right?
Yeah.
Because each one we are meant for specific purposes, and we cannot judge ourselves by what others are doing. We
Right.
have to look into ourselves and our
Right.
own magic.
Right.
And these collaborations are important because it also needs and requires a lot of forgiveness.
Right.
Because it's not easy
Mhm.
to deal with people. I mean, you can please Allah by doing what He has asked us to do, but it's very difficult when it
please
comes to people.
Right.
And that's why we need to have that forbearance and husnizan, that positive thinking about others.
Right.
Imam Ali said this. He said that the beauty of the flower is as such that it leaves its fragrance even in the hand that crushes it.
Wow.
Right? Means even if we are broken, traumatized, we are hurt, we can still leave an impact. We are still significant. And that's what we need to realize, I believe.
This is amazing. And some of our biggest problems in life arise from our relationships.
Absolutely.
And some of the closest ones hurt us the most.
True.
How do we deal with it? I mean, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of resentment out there in the world. And there are lots of these issues that are buried deep down in our hearts.
Right.
So, how do we really cope up with it?
I think if we look at our culture, I'm talking about Kashmir, we are not people who communicate. We have malal, right? We have this.
Yeah.
So malal is also a term for this sort of this resentment that you hold against the other person because they have wronged you.
Right.
The more important part is don't let things grow so big, because you see, when the distances increase, there is much more awkwardness, right? So the idea that how small things become bigger, right? We have these trivial issues. I mean, people, when they come in therapy, couples, families, etc., and they talk about these problems they have, and when you go back and back and back, and that's what you do in therapy, you try to see like where did it all start? It started from something trivial. If you had talked about it and addressed this issue when it started and communicated about it, right? I mean, we wouldn't be having that conversation. So I think a huge problem, or one of the biggest problems in relationships, is we don't have effective communication. And what do I mean by that? I say something, you hear something else. That's problematic. Effective communication is when I say something with a certain context and a specific meaning, you understand it in the same manner.
Right.
And I think that is lacking somewhere as well. And a huge reason that we are having ups and downs in relationships, we are having problems in relationships, is communication. But on the other hand, we also have this concept that we call as pop psychology. We often use terms like gaslighting, narcissism. We often use these terms very loosely, right? So that has become another thing. Like, somebody
So we're
did
labeling
something.
each other.
Yeah, somebody
Yeah.
did something wrong to you. Oh, this person is a narcissist, or this person is really toxic, or this person is gaslighting me. So
Right.
I think clinically, how we use these terms is very different than how they're used in the popular culture. So I think that is also something that we need to revisit. And we need to look at the people that we are connecting with. How much of similarity do we share in our core values, especially the people who are close to us? That's very important.
And Yaqeen, tell me something. When you talk about positive psychology, when you
Right.
talk about psychotherapy, we usually this is what the general theme is. We are talking about comfort and being at ease, self love, and all these flowery
Right.
concepts. But how often do you familiarize people with the idea of being comfortable with a little bit of discomfort?
Oh, I mean, discomfort is really very important. This idea that "لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ," we created man in hard work and toil. And that is part of existential therapy as well, that
Right.
you're responsible and life is not all, hunky-dory. There are things that
Right.
you would have to address. It's not all going to be a very smooth ride.
Right.
And even the idea of positive psychology, it has a deep relationship with your values, with your virtues, and with what you do as a person, character, and meaning that we have. So these are deeper questions that positive psychology is related with. It's not all about life is all good or it's positive, but it's also about exploring the deeper parts of ourselves.
Right.
And what Jung calls as the shadow,
Mm.
or
Carl Jung's
in
shadow.
yeah, the Jung
Yeah.
calls it the shadow work that we
Uh-huh.
do in analytical psychology,
Uh-huh.
or in the Freud's concept of classic
Uh-huh.
psychoanalysis, the concept of the id, right?
Uh-huh.
Those things that we have a version of ourselves, our deepest desires that we are afraid to express because of the societal norms or because of whatever reasons.
Mhm.
So they get repressed,
Right.
right? So that is a part of ourselves that we need to acknowledge. We can't
Mhm.
run away from it. But the question is, how do we make peace with that? So that's why a lot of work is still needed. You know, we spend a lot of time doing all
I have,
these, yeah,
in the you touched the popular psychology and
right,
how things are on Instagram and other places, and then I've come to realize that our young generation. This is a common theme, maybe not very specific, but there is this weird. They don't want any discomfort. They don't want people to tell them, okay, there is a certain way of doing things,
right,
even if the way is the right way.
right,
And how do you tackle that? You see that in young generation, they don't
right.
want to listen to older people, and there has to be, obviously there is a other side to it also. But how do you draw a line?
I think truth is hard.
Yeah.
Truth is bitter. That's why people look for fables and stories,
Right.
right? It's easy to believe something that is out there
Uh-huh.
rather than researching about it and thinking that,
Ah.
is this really what is happening?
Right.
So we want to take the easier way out,
Mhm.
right? Because the idea of modernity is more and more pleasure and
Mhm.
the avoidance of pain. That's
Right.
our modern definition of happiness.
Right.
So truth is painful,
Uh-huh.
and finding the truth is also a painful process.
Yeah.
And younger generation or certain people, they just don't want to go through that process. They
Uh-huh.
want to reach the end
Right.
without going through the
Right.
process. That's why these shortcuts, oh,
Mhm.
invest in this scheme, you're going to get rich.
Right.
Take this course, you're going to
Uh-huh.
be successful.
Uh-huh.
Do these things, and you're going to be this sort of a person.
And that's why people are so vulnerable,
Yes.
they get conned by a lot of these babas and coaches and
Right.
gurus because
And buying into those courses
right.
because they are promising you something that is not there. Whosoever tells you
Okay.
being rich is easy,
Mhm.
whosoever tells you that working on yourself, it's so easy, and these are the 5 steps you have to follow, and you'll be successful, or you'll be rich,
Uh-huh.
or you'll be healthier, it's all nonsense.
Okay.
It's a process,
Right.
and it's a spectrum.
Uh-huh.
So it's always a work in progress.
Right.
But if you are looking for these shortcuts and you are want to be on the other side, the end product, the
Mhm.
result, without going through the process, there are definitely important details that you will miss.
That's so true. So there's this concept of anti-fragility that
Yeah.
Nassim Talib talks about. So I love this concept. It can apply to a person, a biological system, and also to maybe nations, to bigger organizations. The idea is very, very simple. So there is something very fragile, it breaks, and what does not break may be called robust. But what gets better after breaking
Right.
is anti-fragile.
True.
So we as human systems are anti-fragile. We as
Right.
biological systems are anti-fragile. So for example, we put a lot of we work out and put some impact and stress on our muscles. The muscle fibers might break, but they
Right.
regrow stronger.
Right.
So yeah, we should not lift weights that kind of cause trouble. But then if we expose ourselves to limited amount of stress time and again, for example, cold therapy is very effective
Right.
for the same reason. Yeah, Wim Hof breathing is very effective for the
True.
same reason.
And
So
human condition is very di- I mean there is a lot of dichotomy that we can see in the
ah,
human condition,
right,
and there are a lot of opposites,
uh-huh,
and that's something also which makes the human experience so rich.
right,
There is sadness, but there
uh-huh,
is also happiness.
right,
There is pain and suffering,
uh-huh,
but there is also healing.
yeah,
There is trauma,
uh-huh,
but there is also resilience.
right,
So both these ends, right? The human condition. Once you know the one, then
uh-huh,
you will know the other. So I
beautiful,
think we are somehow rolling between these two and trying to make sense of ourselves,
uh-huh,
the world around us, the universe, and our relationship with it.
amazing. So now that we have talked about these topics, what if we open the floor to our amazing audience who have been
Oh,
patiently watching us, listening to us? How are you all doing? Oh, I didn't hear it. We can be a little louder. It's a forest. So, We would like to have some questions or some comments. Please feel free.
Yes, sir. I have a question,
Yes.
rather a query. It is wonderful to be in the lap of this nature. So, my question is to Yaqeen, sir, regarding nature. In clinical psychology, how important it is to be in nature, close to nature? Does it have effect, or it is a myth? Just when you come close to nature, you feel that calmness and quiet.
I think that's a very beautiful question to be asked, that the effect of nature on human beings, right? We come from nature, and the elements that are actually found in our body are actually found not only on the earth, but also in the space. So, in other words, we are sort of like this space dust,
Celestial bodies.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, the idea is that we are very deeply connected with nature. And there have been several studies, a lot of authoritative studies, which actually say that walking in the nature, let's say every day for a certain amount of time, leads to the reduction in stress, as well as blood pressure and other mental health conditions one might have. In fact, a recent study that I was studying also talks about walking in the nature, but more like brisk walking or running. So, doing that in nature can actually have very good therapeutic effects on depression and anxiety, especially. And that's what this study was specific to. So, we know this for sure, that the connection that we have with nature has a direct impact upon us. Because being closer to nature, especially when in our modern lives, we rarely get to see it. Like how nature works, nature in action, and how nature takes its own course. So I think even looking at it from from the perspective of being a therapist, one of the important things I always recommend the people that I see in therapy is go out, take a walk. Don't have sedentary lifestyle that we have. We at least need an hour of movement every single day to stay healthy. And think of it like this: our body and mind, physical body has a direct connection with our mental health. When you're physically healthy, you tend to be mentally healthier, and the other way around as well. When you're feeling depressed or anxious, it also affects your physical health. And mental health conditions also have biological basis. So one of the ways to restore our mental health especially is being a part of this. And I can say that because to all of you participants, you are a part of this program, and we are here, and we do feel changes in us. It's very different, right? We start feeling that we are having this light moment or these light moments that have an impact on us. So I think it's very important that all of us take time to not only be in nature, because one other thing that nature does is also it disconnects you, from the other things, from the other busy things that are happening in life. And human beings need that. We sometimes need to disconnect from whatever we are doing. And this is even important for being successful, because being successful is not only about you overwork yourself. You also have to take some time out where you can replenish your inner resources and clear your mind. And nature is one of the best ways to clear our mind fog.
Right.
So it's highly recommended, and I believe it's extremely therapeutic. And we are having a first-hand experience of that right now while we are doing this.
It's so blissful. To give the audience an account of it, it's one of the most blissful moments I've had in a long time.
Right.
And to add to what Yaqeen said, see, we are living in the best times in the history of mankind.
True.
So, in terms of the availability of food, the health we have, the life expectancy, and all these different parameters. And I think the smartest of the people in this world are the ones who take benefit of the modern, beautiful things that we have gotten, and also the amazing nature that we have, thankfully, close to us in Kashmir. So we should take a good use of it. And then some of the biggest issues right now, Yaqeen, you know it very more than anybody else: mental health issues, the metabolic diseases, and all that. So their therapy, their therapeutics is basically in nature.
Right.
So we should get in aligned with it, and at the same time, remember that there are amazing blessings that we have as part of being in 2024, and we should embrace them as well.
I also have something to add to it.
Yes.
Because it also has a mystical connection.
Oh yes.
वो ये है कि जब भी कभी रहमत नाजिल होती है, होने वाली होती है लोगों पे, तो लोगों के बिहेवियर्स की वजह से वो रहमत उन पे नाजिल नहीं होती, फिर वो रहमत पहाड़ों की तरफ डाली जाती है।
क्या बात है।
इसीलिए पहाड़ों को बहुत ही अहमियत इस्लाम ने भी दी है। कुरान में भी बहुत जगह जिक्र है कि अगर हम ये कुरान पहाड़ पे नाज़िल करते तो आप देखते कि पहाड़ रेज़ा रेज़ा हो जाता। नबी करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम को पहली रिवायत नबूवत कहाँ पर मिली? गार हिरा में, दैट वाज अ माउंटेन। मूसा अलैहि सलाम को तौरात कहाँ पर मिली? दैट वाज अ माउंटेन। सो माउंटेन्स हैव ए डीप इफेक्ट, क्योंकि इन पे अल्लाह की रहमत नाजिल होती है। और दज्जाल के वक्त कहाँ चले जाना है हमें? रिवायत के मुताबिक पहाड़ों की तरफ चले जाना। तो इसीलिए पहाड़ों में एक स्पिरिचुअल कनेक्शन, एक मिस्टिकल कनेक्शन भी है। सो दैट्स व्हाई वी फील
क्या
कनेक्टेड।
बात है, क्या बात
So
है, बहुत
beautiful.
खूब, बहुत खूब। Thank you so much, Sahil. This is a beautiful addition to it.
Lovely
This
perspective.
completes the answer.
Right.
Thank you, thank you. So, uh, any other questions?
So you mentioned about cold therapy. उसके बारे में कुछ बताइए.
So, there is
How does it work?
So there are different studies about cold therapy that suggest that once you expose yourself to some cold, uh, on a routine basis, it has an effect on your immune system. It improves your immune system. It has an effect on increasing your happiness levels. So, आपका dopamine, आपका serotonin levels have been seen, and also epinephrine levels have significantly increased. You know, in people who take cold therapy. आपने आप खुद भी cold therapy मतलब, let's not go by the fancy word. It means you have to take maybe a cold shower, and you could even go a little further, take an ice bath. So have maybe ice and put it in a bath, and then take a jump and be there for some time.
Effective?
It's very effective. So you should try it. And there are a couple of videos around how you should breathe, because initially it may be a little too much. So try little by little, give yourself little exposure. And once you're able to do it, you can then retain yourself for longer. It has been seen to have remarkable impact. In fact, मैंने खुद बहुत try किया है. So to reveal to you all, which I may sound like a very weird person now. So Chilai Kalan mein, I make it a point to take a bath every day with cold water for 40 days straight. So that's my way of, my connection with the cold. It has one spiritual element also, a spiritual in a way that when you expose yourself to something that you're scared of more often, you get used to fear, and the fear starts affecting you lesser and lesser. So you should try it, and it is remarkably helpful. So I have tried it with some good results, and I feel every time I take a cold bath, I am a lot happier because of the hormones. There is a hormone rush in the body, and it can stay up to several hours, some studies say. So do check it out. Read more about it, explore it more, and it's a wonderful thing to try.
Sir, I want to know that yesterday I had a question, but I didn't get the answer. And today I have the same question. That is, if a person feels disconnected with everything around, be it the relations, be it the things around, be it anything else, be it nature, be it, I mean, spiritual connectivity, how is it? How is it? How can we take it? Back. How can we? I mean, come back from that? Is somehow therapy helpful to that? I just
Right.
want to know.
Right.
So, Yaqeen, it's your question.
Right. I think it depends on several factors that we are talking about. That whatever we are feeling, this disconnection and what we also call as dysphoria, and this feeling of apathy or disconnection with that everything that we have. So one of the things that therapy tries to do and to achieve is, why are we feeling the way we are? So what is the reason for that, or what can be several factors because of which it's happening? Because I think the first step towards recovery or healing is knowing what's exactly going on. So what therapy will tell you in the initial stages is that why something is happening, and if this is happening, these are certain things that you will feel in certain conditions, let's say. But then there is also the idea of what we call as intervention plan. Like, why don't we try certain things, right? It doesn't mean that whatever things we do in therapy, all of them work, right? Oh, this and this doesn't work for me. Okay, so if there is a list of 10 things, at least if one of them works for you, why don't we do that more often? Okay, so that's the idea. So the idea isn't every single thing works. So it's more like trial and error, but The idea is whatever is discussed, for example, in therapy, a lot of it has to be done outside the therapy room, because therapy is generally 50 minutes a week, right? But then the week is way longer than that. Even a day has 24 hours. So the idea is we experiment what we discuss in the therapy sessions. For example, if a person has social anxiety, and a part of the exposure would be telling them, starting from something very small. Oh, I'm very afraid of the crowds, right? Why don't you go to Google and search crowds, right? And you see the pictures of people and see how overwhelming you feel. Then you write down the score. I just saw these pictures of a lot of people on the Google, and out of a scale of 1 to 10, I feel the fear is 5 or 6, right? So you make a hierarchy. And ultimately, the biggest fear is speaking in public, for example. So one by one, you try to tackle that, from those pictures to talking to a stranger to talking in front of a lot of group of people. And when we do it again and again, what ends up happening is that the intensity or the social anxiety, it keeps, getting lesser and lesser. So ultimately, whatever we discuss, the idea of therapy is also we try to practically implement that. So why not try all these different things? So, for example, therapy, be it the therapy sessions itself, whatever is additionally provided, or certain things that are recommended, being a part of the community, trying and expanding these options. And how many of these options have you tried, and how many have worked for you? So even if there is one single thing that you can hold on to, even a kind word, if that is there, so I think that goes a long way. And if there is anything that makes a if nothing makes sense to you, but you find this one thing that makes a little sense to you, what if we try to focus on that and try to do more of that? So I think that is a good start. Even if you're feeling that nothing makes sense, but that one small thing is meaningful to you. And that's why we are trying to create these experiences, like writing these small notes as memories to the participants of Compass 3.0. What's the idea? That it will stay with you. Then when you look back at it, it will evoke certain emotions. It will make you feel a certain way. And that's really important. Oh, I like that feeling. Why don't I do it more?
I had this participant, I won't name her, and she told me that she has been part of Compass 1.0. And whenever she is feeling low, she goes back to those small notes, and then it brings all the memories back.
Lovely.
So these seeds of connection that we are sowing through communicating with each other and then reinforcing positive communication, they have a long way to go.
And sometimes we think that what we are doing is very small,
Yeah.
but we never know the impact
Uh-huh.
that it has on the other person.
So true.
And sometimes it can just be remarkable.
Yeah.
So it's important to always be kind.
Right. Right.
And know that words and
Uh-huh.
actions have impact upon others. Just like we can hurt other people, but also sometimes just a kind word, it goes the long way. So it works both ways.
Amazing. Amazing. So, do we have some more questions?
Okay, the question is you were talking about self discovery. So, how do we discover who we are? Please give a specific answer to 4 or 5 points.
So, Yaqeen, you want to tackle this?
Why not? I think the question is very profound, and that's why I'm thinking about it. And you want the answer in a very specific manner. You're like, give us this point, and it has to be specific. How do we discover ourselves? Our discovery is, it's an organic process, and it's also a process. By that I mean, I don't think you can ever come up with and say, you know what, I have totally found who I am. Parts of personality, and we know this by studies, personality is relatively stable, but it keeps modifying and changing itself until we die. So it's a work in progress all the time. And how do we discover ourselves? First step, spending time with yourself. That's the first key. And one of the things that characterizes our modern world is being busy, right? But whenever I have to buy anything, if I have to buy a telephone or I have to buy a gadget, I do all my due diligence. I check the price, I check my budget, I check the RAM, I
You
check
ask
the features.
five friends.
Right? We ask 5 friends,
Yeah.
and if then I read the Amazon reviews, how many that how often do we do that when it comes to our own life? When was the last time we sat with ourselves and asked ourselves some really important questions? Because looking within ourselves is really essential, and that's where it begins. If we are so much focused externally, other people, right? Expectations, or what we are doing, right? Rather than who we are. So it's important for self discovery, first of all, to spend time with yourself. Secondly, building and investing in yourself. One of the things that you really need to do is, I always believe this, the more you invest in yourself, the better it is. And what do I mean by that? Studies have consistently shown that people who invest in experiences rather than material things tend to be happier and more fulfilled about their lives. So the idea is, have you invested in your knowledge? Have you invested in your skills? Have you invested in other people, right? Your network. And what kind of skills, what kind of knowledge, and what kind of things have you invested in? That's another way you discover yourself, is by investing in yourself. Third thing that you can do is, we talked about freedom and we talked about choice. We are bound, I mean, we are free, but we are also bound by the limitations which are out there, right? So, for example, if you're in Kashmir and you're like, you know what, I have all the freedom, I can choose, I can study whatever I want to. But after you pass your high school, you actually have only 3 or 4 streams to choose from. So you can say I'm free, but your options are very limited. So the way to self discovery is, how do you expand these options? And these options can be related to your career. What is your backup plan if something doesn't work? What is your financial plan if this thing doesn't work? Similarly, how are you expanding these options in your life is another way of self discovery. It's very
And
important to do that.
and I'll add the final 2 points if that's all right.
Perfect.
The fourth one I think would be to be okay with committing as many mistakes as possible. So, going out and being there, experiencing things, and then if you commit a mistake, you know this is not the way, I need to probably pivot, commit other mistakes, and then through those mistakes you end up growing and evolving, and it's like it's a process, you know. You're already there, and like that block of marble, there is a beautiful statue inside that marble. You just need to chisel out the rough edges, and you could do that by putting yourself out there. And then one of the easiest ways to self discovery is finding a peer, a mentor, a murshid.
I was going to say that as well. Yeah.
So that is, or many of them. Why just one? So that is one way. And if you find a good mentor, they'll make this journey a lot easier. So I think we have 5 points, thankfully.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and just to add to
Yeah.
that,
The sixth bonus.
a bonus point, right?
Yeah.
Which is related to mentorship, is the idea of receiving feedback. The only people which grow in life are people with growth mindset. And one essential part of growth mindset is that you are open to receiving feedback and criticism, which is positive and helpful in nature, right? So, mentorship helps with that, right? For example, being a therapist, thousands of hours of clinical practice, supervised clinical practice. So, your supervisor tells you, don't do this, you have to do that. So, a teacher is someone who has more knowledge than you.
Right.
A mentor is someone who has more experience than you, right? So that mentorship is really important because of the fact that it helps you and it makes you open and vulnerable to receive that feedback. And that's a really important part of growth. I would never have been where I am if I did not have the right support of the family and their mentorship and the mentors that I met in different parts of the world. And I learned and I saw what they were doing, I observed, and I was sort of like committing the mistakes that you said. A lot of the mistakes, some were apparent, some were not. And a very small example of that I'll just give you, and then we can end it up. I started my journey in Malaysia. This is 2010. I had passed my 12th examination and I went there. So part of the curriculum there in the bachelor's degree was, you have to take co-curriculars for um, 6 semesters, which is 3 years. And every semester you take like half a credit and it makes 3 credits at all. So you have more than 100 choices to choose from. And I chose English debating, right? So generally in the Asian parliamentary style, the government and the opposition, three people, and you have your mentor and your teacher who is also the judge of the debate. And the motion was something related to politics, and I had good knowledge of that. Okay, so we are just 7 people in the room, including me, and we have 20 minutes to prepare, and you have 7 minutes to speak, and that's the international standard. And the judge goes like, "You're next." So I stood up and I spoke what I did. And when I finished, I just realized I had only spoken for 18 seconds. I just didn't know what to say after that. Doing it for 4 years, again and again and again. It included a lot of hard work, including transcribing speeches, listening to speeches. So, what is this person saying? Write it down, write it down. And I was like, what's the point of it? But I did it so often, often and often, it becomes automatic processing. I can easily speak 8 to 10 hours a day, and that's absolutely okay now. So from 18 seconds to 8 to 10 hours a day. So I was not always very fluent and comfortable with speaking English. It's not my first language, right? So how did that help? How did that work? It worked because of mentorship. Very small example. For example, we repetitively use certain words which are redundant when we are speaking, right? So one of the rules in the English debate club that we had in the university in Malaysia, and it has the Asia's best speaking, the Asian debate club was in our university. So we're blessed to have that. So one of the things was, if you are using any redundant word very often, so let's say if you use "it means," it means, if you use it. So to make you conscious, whenever you use "it means," everybody who's in the room, they will say back "it means." So you get conscious that I'm repeating something, right? So what is this? It's feedback. And it makes you grow, right? Or I used to have this, Arabic word, yani. So I would say, you read this book, yani, it means like this and that. So my mentor was like, you don't use Arabic word while you're speaking English. So be conscious of that. So then you make a list of these words and you put them out of your vocabulary. So this is just a very small example of how you grow with feedback over time, so far as you're open to it. I hope that answers your question.
Amazing. That was a very big answer. Yaqeen, this was such a meaningful, deep, and at the same time, a slow, comfortable, and such a refreshing conversation.
Absolutely. I enjoyed every part of it. Thank you so much. It was really beautiful, very relaxed in the lap of nature. It has been a beautiful experience and the first of its kind for me as well.
Yeah,
So
it
thank you
is.
for
It is
that.
the first of its kind, and what an amazing audience we had. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to us with such patience. And my dear friends, if you're watching it, thank you so much for watching it till the end. I hope this conversation adds so much value to your lives. With these words, I bid you goodbye. Please take care of yourselves. Bye bye.